If hell is the proverbial stick to get us to adhere to certain doctrines, then heaven is the proverbial carrot. For the believer, it is a nice thing to believe that if you are faithful, you will be told, "Well done, good and faithful servant," by your deity and receive a spot in heaven or whatever paradise you have been promised. I'm not sure if any of you have ever seen it, but a while back, a Christian book was published called Heaven is for Real. In it, the allegedly true story of a little boy is recounted, in which he died, went to heaven, and saw Jesus and a bunch of other Bible characters. I thumbed through the story recently, and the skeptical part of my brain seemed ready to blow out the back of my skull. Everything from the child's apparently deep fundamentalist programming to the dreamlike feeling of the whole vision to the idea of a maximally great deity resurrecting a child to be his messenger boy seemed to me to smack of absurdity. Now, I guess I can't be too harsh on the Burpo family. Well, maybe I can be. It's kind of questionable to put your child out there like that. But I'll be honest. I certainly drew some comfort from the idea of, as John Bunyan put it, a celestial city awaiting me at the end of my pilgrimage through this life. However, as I lost my faith, I began to think more and more about the implications of the scriptural view of the afterlife, and it struck me that heaven is almost as disturbing as hell when you think about it. Consider some of these points. For the concept of any form of conscious reward or punishment in an afterlife to make any sense, one must assume that the spirit that enters the afterlife retains all of the memories, personality, and consciousness that it had when it was bound to a physical body. And if it is true that few make it to heaven because narrow is the way that leads to salvation, and wide is the path that leads to destruction or eternal damnation, then this would mean that the people in heaven would retain the knowledge that many of the people who they knew and loved on this side of the grave are being eternally tormented in fire that was specifically designed by their deity to burn but not consume its victims. Those in heaven would also have the knowledge that their deity absolutely has the power to end all of this cruelty and suffering at a moment's notice, but refuses to because for some reason it needs to have those it doesn't like trapped in eternal conscious torment forever. Theist, how do you reconcile this with the lives of compassion, empathy, and mercy that you believe you are obligated to try to exemplify on this side of the grave? How do you think that you will reconcile it once you cross over? Will you be standing on heaven's golden street corners, collecting signatures and handing out pamphlets, urging people to ask God to end the torment of the literally billions that he is having tortured? Will whatever social networking websites that exist in heaven be filled with people attempting to create pages to encourage the closing of hell and the immediate release of all those being tormented? Seriously, how is this going to work? I guess you could maybe be willing to argue that God will lobotomize the part of your mind that feels compassion and empathy for others, which would say a lot about the character of your deity. I mean, is Yahweh willing to reprogram your mind in order to override your objections or concerns about what he is doing? It appears that your God may not only wipe every tear, but every mind as well. Another question. What will you do to pass time in heaven? Most Christians I know believe that they will praise their God forever and ever and into the unending future, and Yahweh will accept their praises. But why? Why would any secure, maximally great being so desire such a constant stream of validation from lower beings constantly flooding his presence? Is this not the height of egotism and insecurity? According to some of the alleged visions of some of the Old Testament prophets, like Isaiah, Yahweh specifically created a special type of six-winged angelic being whose specific purpose is to constantly circle his throne, screaming, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty." Once I heard an interpretation that said that whenever one of these angels makes one circuit around God's throne, they see a new facet of God's nature. Regardless of this, though, exactly how egomaniacal do you have to be to specifically create beings whose only purpose is to flatter you and tell you how great you are? I mean, are we to believe that a deity who so hates pride and haughtiness in his creation and values humility in his followers would create beings whose only purpose is to blow sunshine up his butt? Theist, hypothetically, what happens if for some reason you stop praising or decide that you don't want to praise anymore? Will you be allowed to respectfully bow out? A number of us have already made comparisons to the God of the Bible in various real-life and fictitious authoritarian dictatorships, but I think Christopher Hitchens classically lampooned the Christian heaven the best with the spot-on analogy of a celestial North Korea, in which all praise is directed to the dear leader who is the ruler of all, and the great leader who is the dear leader's father, who is also somehow still ruler and sovereign of all forever. All tasks are done for the glory of the dear leader, all undertakings first seek his blessing, and all good fortune is celebrated by giving thanks to the dear leader. And if you happen to criticize the dear leader or state that he is not perfect, he has set up special prison camps for individuals like you, where you will pay for your lack of respect. The problem is that critics of the North Korean regime inside the country can either defect or die to get out. Not so with the concept of heaven and hell in many of the Abrahamic traditions. According to many evangelists and proselytizers of various stripes, Yahweh supposedly wants to have a personal, deep, loving relationship with all of us. However, as I think about it more and more, I realize that this would never be possible for me. Sure, if such a deity existed, I could be impressed with his power, and I could be afraid of his wrath and all-seeing eye, afraid of being, as Jonathan Edwards put it, a sinner in the hands of an angry God. But I could never again love and respect him with all my heart, which is supposedly the thing he wants from me above all else. For it would not be something I'd give out of sincere piety, but something I'd give out of fear and coercion, and that would not be acceptable. Next video will deal with why we can tell that the concepts of heaven, paradise, and hell were created by superstitious people in the past.